Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, Surah Al Hijr, chapter 15, and we will today cover verses 10 to 21. And these are the references, and this is our contact in case anyone wishes to contact through Islam. Recap so far. If you remember, we covered verses 1 to 9 in our previous presentation, and I'll go through some salient points. First is the Quran is a complete book and it calls itself Al-Kitab and declares that what is noted within its folds is perspicuous and makes things clear to rationally thinking human beings. Those who resort to kufr waste their worldly life in the pursuit of things associated with physical existence and thus live at a sub-animalistic level. Such a life always ends in regrets and disappointments towards the end of their stay in this world. And this was covered in one verse previously, that human beings, when they do not think that their life has been worth a while, then they become depressed. They feel that it has been aimless and their efforts have in life gone wasted. Events in the human world follow the known laws and values, and those who make an effort can find their details and thus benefit from their life. The time of respite is kept within the functioning of nations so that people can learn from their mistakes and mend their ways in time. So important point which Quran has drawn our attention repeatedly to is that we should remain highly aware of the way we are living our life, and we should be aware of the deeds which we are doing in this life and keep them within the permanent values of the Quran. And the Quran recognizes that the environment initially, when the system is not established, will always be challenging. It is not that it will not be challenging, and Allah is always a witness to it. So the way our psyche works, it takes into account those things. Once we have an iman and we do salih deeds, then other things are taken care of within the way the system functions. That is the way human psychology functions. Those who pass the message of Allah to others should never be fearful of being called insane or mad. In fact, we should be prepared. That is why Quran refers to this aspect, that whenever the message was given to people, the majority thought that this person has come with something different. He thinks every one of us is wrong, and our ancestors are wrong as well. And this is something very difficult to swallow. And then they start accusing you. People take time to accept the guidance of the Quran. So the Quran over here says is that it is not a question of you being wrong or others being wrong. What you should do is look in the light of the Quran, the criteria for right and wrong, the criteria for haq and batil, and then check it. So that it's an external criteria. And we know that even in human world, there are certain standards. For example, for weights, for measurements, there are certain standards which are the same across the world. Even in case of time, it is taken in reference to Greenwich Mean Time. People who look for miracles in the worldly life do not understand the functioning of the law of requital. In the human world, there is nothing miraculous. Each self is responsible for its deeds, and this is where we need to remain focused. The Quran is preserved and protected for all times. Momineen need to make it part of their self-sense of being in order to strengthen their iman. In the process of working for Deen, we need to keep reminding ourselves that the formula of the Quran is as effective as it was in the initial era of Islam. It will continue to be effective for all times. Hence, we need to draw benefit from this fact based on evidence. So over here, we went through a number of points under this verse 9. The Quran says that it has been protected and preserved. So it is not that just that Allah has preserved and protected it. It is the task of the Momineen is to take advantage of it. So the address is to Momineen. Those who do not accept the Quran's position as a criteria or a standard for human beings, it makes no difference. And what others have done is they have tried to contaminate it. That is why we find so many variations in different translations. Now let us look at the first two verses for today's talk, 10 and 11. Mocking and jesting should be expected when communicating the message of Wahi. وَلَقَدْ أَرْسَلْنَا مِنْ قَبْلِكَ فِي شِيَعِ الْأَوَّلِينَ وَمَا يَأْتِيهِمْ مِنْ رَسُولٍ إِلَّا كَانُوا بِهِ يَسْتَهْزِئُونَ. I've highlighted the 2 points here, يَأْتِيهِمْ مِنْ رَسُولٍ بِهِ يَسْتَهْزِئُونَ. And you are not some new messenger. We also sent messengers before you to different groups of people. But whichever messenger arrived, people ridiculed him in the same way, just as they are mocking you. Hence, there is no need for you to be concerned. So Quran over here says that the messenger, sending of messengers is not something new. These continued as long as the process of wahi kept continuing within towards mankind. And now the position is that the final book of wahi completed in all respects, the Quran has arrived. And now we, the one who understand the Quran, they become the messengers, not the messengers who are receiving wahi, but we communicate this message after understanding ourselves to others. And the position remains the same, that those who pass on the message to others, others will oppose it and also ridicule them. Some more reflections on this. The messengers of Allah were mocked. Why? The Quran has pointed to this aspect in a number of places with a view to apprise us about the human psyche. Allah created man, hence he has to describe the human psyche so that those who wish to bring out their latent potentials comprehend these issues based on evidence. And this is important. We have gone through some parts of aspects of human psyche, and which are some of them, those are carrying a lot of negative emotions and negative biases. So those are the ones which we have to recognize in others as well. And we know that we have overcome a number of those negative biases within us. So this is something which we need to keep it in mind and not to be discouraged by negative comments by others. By being cautioned about the possibility of being mocked, we get prepared. And if we had also mocked others at the start of this journey, we will understand it better to be confronted by this kind of reaction. I put down this comment that if we had also mocked others at the start of this journey, if we look back, when the part which was under non-Quranic spell of our life, then we can see that we also might have done something like that. If we were convinced of our own path before coming to the Quran, then we would have also thought negatively about others. Those who do not like the message and then decide to oppose it will come with all kinds of labeling, and we see it all the time. To be able to tolerate it, to not become fearful, and to be able to continue on this journey is part of the conviction of its being the path of Deen. So the main point is that we have to convince ourselves. And if we are not fully convinced or we do not find enough courage, then we have to develop that courage. Not to sit back and say, oh, this is not my responsibility. By some method, by some means, by some ways, we should communicate the message wherever we are. In fact, we need to be expecting it. And as and when we are confronted with such reactions, we should feel pleased that it is a sign of our being on Surah Al-Mustaqim. What I've done is I put inverted commas and pleased, just not in a negative sense, but in a positive sense that what we are doing is right and we get a support from the Quran for this act of ours for what we are doing. After such reactions, we need to review these episodes individually and collectively in order to increase our firmness in the cause of Allah and to reinforce our resolve to continue striving on this path. The Quran has reassured Momineen that Allah has sent down the book for the guidance of mankind and it is not meant to cause man-devised alaykal Qur'ana litashqa. This is given in Surah Taha, the 20th chapter, right at the beginning. That this Quran has not been sent on to you to cause you distress and unhappiness. Not at all. It can't be that a book sent by Allah to mankind and it should cause pain to us. In fact, this book is the one which is drawing our attention towards all the distress and unhappiness, fear and huzen caused by the man-made system. Despite being an uphill task, because human beings have created unjust systems and mankind need to be apprised about the correct path of life. In order to create a system free from fear and grief, Jamaat-e Momineen need to strive on this uphill path in order to get the benefits of this system. There is a lot more to it psychologically, which we need to look through ourselves as well. And hopefully more points will come out in this regard, that Quran is not to cause distress and unhappiness. If we see the distress and unhappiness of being ridiculed and mocked by others is caused by others, it is because they are not following the Quran. So that is part of fear and grief that the wrong system creates for righteous human beings. Verses 12 to 13, our hearts and minds become infected through our behavior and life. Two verses here. كَذَلِكَ نَسْلُكُهُ فِي قُلُوبِ الْمُجْرِمِينَ لَا يُؤْمِنُونَ بِهِ وَقَدْ خَلَتْ سُنَّةُ الْأَوَّلِينَ. Over here, interestingly, that Quran has now explained from their aspect, that is, the people who oppose it. This is the common psychological condition of all criminals, that in the intoxication of power, they counter reason and facts with ridicule and insults. And then this is the condition of your people. They will never accept Iman in it. And whatever former societies have been doing, they will do the same. So over here, the word sunnat means their conduct, their behavior. We remember kalimat is with the words, with the laws, with the theory of it, and then sunnat is something which is then followed. So Quran says that it is not new. Human beings will keep doing it. And we also witness it in the world in which we live. Verses 12 to 13, the Quran aids in understanding the human psyche and its different states of development. I put down some further reflections on these two verses. Allah has recognized that bad words and the adverse reactions of people will lead to causing distress and anxiety. Sorry, this is part of our training to develop courage as a consequence of our Iman. So ideas should come to our mind that Quran is not there to create problems for us. But the problems are created because of not following the Quran and having a world around us which is not based on the Quranic values, which is based on the man-devised system's values. We may think that it is a weakness due to which they are opposing this message of Allah. And since they are in power, they can say whatever they like. There is a verse in the Quran where Messenger of Allah is guided that they are not opposing you. Because previously you lived in these people, and when you did not have the advantage of the revelation, there was no opposition. Everything was fine. But the moment you have come up with the message of Allah, your life has become difficult or challenging because these people are opposing Allah, not you. And this is a very refined point which we should also keep it in mind, that since the time we have started passing on the message of Allah, the opposition is to Allah. Of course, they see us, the human beings, who are passing on the message as a friend. And they think that they are the ones who are saying that, whereas it is not, we are not passing on something from our own selves. So that is the point we should keep it in mind. Here the Quran caters for such an eventuality and states, وَلَا يَزُنْكَ قَوْلُهُمْ إِنَّ الْإِزَّةَ لِلَّهِ جَمِيعًا هُوَ السَّمِيعُ الْعَلِيمُ. This is a verse from Surah Yunus, which says that Quran says, Wala yazunka, that you should not have any huzn of what they say. Because what they are saying is against Allah, not against you. Innal izzata lillahi jamiyya, that all power comes from Allah. Because they are opposing Allah, and now it is Allah's job to give you power. And the first stage of that power is to create that strength within us. And all of it, see, there is no exception to it. And we have gone through this aspect under the attribute of Izzat. And He is listening as well as He is knowledgeable. And we should also become Sumi and Alim through these this kind of inner, thinking. Never have huzn on what they say. Surely all power comes from the direction of Allah, and He hears and is Alim. By confirming La yuminuna bihi, that is in the two verses we noted, the Quran has informed us about their psyche. La yuminuna bihi means in this Quran, in this message which is being passed on to you, they are not going to have Iman in it. They do not want the guidance of the Quran, so time to move on. This means we should never have any expectations from these people. we should not in any case have expectations except those who have accepted the Iman, because their behavior will be predictable. Those who have not accepted the Iman, they are free for all. You can look at it and see how they behave. This also applies to those who, despite knowing that Tolu Islam stands for the pure Quran and for the system of Deen, are fearful of being labeled. They provide evidence against their own self. So I put down this comment after thinking through it, that this is the state within Tolu Islam as well, because Tolu Islam stands for the pure Quran, and we know it, we stand for the pure Quran. And some of us, at times, I feel that they are apprehensive of opposition from others. And we should try to create enough strength within us to present the Quran rationally to them, and then leave it to them, not to insist on it. Overcoming these fears and vulnerabilities takes ourselves sky high. The change which ensues as a consequence of standing up for the Book of Allah, our self notices the steadfastness and resolve within us. It is not easy, and the Quran recognizes that it is not easy. The Quran recognizes this, but it also declares that the potential should be manifested by us. The Quran says, "Inna allazina qalu rabbuna Allahu summa istaqamu tatanazzalu alayhimul malaikatu alla takhafu wa la tahzanu." And this is an assurance from Allah that what is stated over here is that those people who say that declare that our Rabb is Allah and then stand firm on it, istaqamu, they are very firm on it. And what happens is, as a consequence of that those forces, psychological forces, which are as potentials within us, those appear, those becomes, over here it's beautifully said, these become sent down. And as a consequence of that, the fear and huzn starts to disappear. In fact, we start to understand it. So this is something which we should keep it in mind. Verses 14-15, the psyche of those who look for miracles in this world. So in the continuation of that, then Quran brings out another aspect of people who oppose this message. وَلَوْ فَتَحْنَا عَلَيْهِمْ بَابًا مِنَ السَّمَاءِ فَظَلُّوا فِيهِ يَعْرُجُونَ لَقَالُوا إِنَّمَا سُكِّرَتْ أَبْصَارُنَا بَلْ نَحْنُ قَوْمٌ مَسْحُورُونَ. So what happens is that this is also another aspect of people who are irrational and not thinking rationally and think their life is fine, and they do not question the world around them. So what they do is, and particularly religious kind of belief system in which people expect miracles, they say that if you are truthful in your claim of risalat, then bring angels before us. This is merely an argument of theirs. The fact is that if we had opened some gate in the sky before them, and even if they have started to climb into it, even then they will not accept Iman. So rational side of human beings are not going to accept Iman by just looking at miracles, because the first thing which will come to our mind is that this is some kind of a magic. So these kind of people, and in any case, if those people accept Iman after that and claim that they have accepted Iman, that is of no use to the Quran. At that time, they will start saying that our eyes have been caused to be closed, or a spell has been put on us. Beautifully put by the Quran on the human psyche, that since they have made a decision that we are not going to accept this message, and even if a miracle comes before us, then we are going to reject it. The way to have Iman is that intellect and reasoning should be used for the Quran, not that demands of these kinds of supernatural events should be made. And such demands, miracles, and we hear that from the religious people, that one day so-and-so was in Africa and another day he found himself in Medina or something like that. All these are concoctions of their own thoughts, their own desires, and which does not help in the practical world. Verses 14-15, those who look for miracles in life are of no use to the Quran. Over here, I have expanded some of the points. People who demand and look for miracles in their life, their psyche is not yet ready for the Quran. The world of religions is full of such things where human beings do not take responsibility for their thoughts and deeds. If you look at their life closely, they are quite good at pursuing the physical benefits of life and follow their unbridled desires without giving a thought to the consequences of what they do. We will see that even within the religious world, something which very clearly they benefit because of other human beings, they associated with a miracle, that this is a miracle of Allah, that last night I said to Nafal, and that is why this has happened next day. Whereas they can very clearly see that it is through human hands it has happened. If that person had not come forward and helped them, there would have been no miracle. And a lot of their prayers or supplications will go unanswered, and they will never talk of that those which went unanswered, why was it like that? Because they are not looking for the law of requital. They are not using the rational side of their mind. And this is very misleading. The Quran calls it abitat amaluhum, that their deeds go wasted. However, once it comes to forgiveness, love, mercy, suddenly they bring God into it and want all blessings without making any change to their way of living. Why do they do this? And that is an important question which we have to ask and find answer through the Quran. This conduct of theirs is going to be presented as an evidence before them at some point in their self's journey of life. Of course, then it will be too late and the time for rectification would have gone. This is what the Quran terms as فَحَابِطَتْ أَعْمَالُهُمْ فَلَا نُقِيمُ لَهُمْ يَوْمَ الْقِيَامَةِ وَزْنًا. And it's a sheer waste of human efforts that while we live this life, particularly even under the man-made system where we suffer a lot, we face a lot of challenges. The life is not easy because cognitively as well as physically. And then we get nothing at the end of that life. Deeds go wasted forever, though these acts of theirs looked very pleasing when they were committing them. So this is something which we should think very closely and find out the rational answer for everything which is taking place around us. What is a miracle? Some supernatural event or display for which our rational mind cannot find an explanation. How will this help us to acquire Iman in Allah and the need for the guidance? The Quran is here to help us develop the rationally thinking potential of our minds in order to establish the system of Deen. For Deen, we need an extremely rational thinking, rational mind, a very reasoning mind where we see clearly how things work in the human world and try to understand them and come to grips with it fully. Because tomorrow when the system of Deen is established and we are running the system, then we are going to confront all the Iblisi and satanic forces around us. And we have to understand them and have a very firm resolve within us that we will stick to our path. And then to manage it, ensuring to provide help in order to manifest the latent potentials of Momineen. Getting convinced of the truth of the Quran after witnessing a miracle will never help us to acquire the Quranic Iman, hence it is of no use to the system of Deen. So people who are looking for miracles, they are not meant for the system of Deen. Verse 16 to 18, using signs of the universe for own interests. وَلَقَدْ جَعَلْنَا فِي السَّمَاءِ بُرُوجًا وَزَيَّنَاهَا لِلنَّاظِرِينَ وَحَفِظْنَاهَا مِنْ كُلِّ شَيْطَانٍ رَجِيمٍ إِلَّا مَنِ اسْتَرَقَ السَّمْعَ فَاتَّبَعَهُ شِهَابٌ مُبِينٌ. Quran has not left any aspect of human world which can go unnoticed and has provided answers for that. And over here, these three verses, and there are some other verses as well in the Quran which point to an important side of this sorcery and magic and people who make it as a business. As far as their assertions that regarding those kinds of things which are mentioned in the Quran, fortune tellers and astrologers can also inform about them through their knowledge of the stars. The state of stars is such that we have spread out stellar bodies in the heights of the heavens and light is reflected from them and they appear very attractive to observers. Human beings have tremendous potentials. Even people who want to make a business out of the galaxies and stars then what they do is they start associating human fortunes with the movement of the stars. And this is something very interesting. And we see it in the world of religion and even in some of the religious mythologies, which include all this. Still, people look at the future of children by looking at the stars. And we have kept these protected from every kind of destructive forces. This is why this supreme system of the universe is operating with such organization and discipline and beauty and precision. This is the reality about the stars, regarding which they say that prophecies can be made about human destinies and events through their orbital movements. The reality of these prophecies is also nothing more than this, that these are merely their conjectures. These conjectures could work at that time when the light of knowledge was not as general as currently. Now, after the Quran, their era has ended. And this is a great blessing from Allah, that Quran has made these things clear for us. And Allama Pervez in his books has emphasized on these things and clarified these things through examples. And this is a great step forward in our understanding of the human world, because it is essential. We don't look for miracles. We don't look for fortune telling. We are totally reliant on our own choices. We know what choices we have to make and what will be the consequences if we make choices outside the values defined by the Quran. And we know exactly what results will ensue in case we stay within the values of the Quran. Now, behind every conjecture and speculation, there exists a brightly lit flame of knowledge and certainty which discloses its truth. So it's a great blessing from Allah's direction that we are understanding the Quran the way Quran wants us to understand its own message. Now let us look at in detail some aspects of these verses 16 to 18. The universe has enough signs to draw our attention to the need for guidance. The Quran has stated at a number of places that numerous aspects of the physical universe around us serve as signs to help to draw our attention to a higher purpose of life for us as human beings. The Quran has stated at a number of places that numerous aspects of the physical universe around us serve as signs to help to draw our attention to a higher purpose of life for us as human beings possessing a heart and mind. It would have been strange if beyond the solar system it was all darkness and nothing there to observe. Just imagine that if universe did not have anything beyond the solar system, what would have been the life like in living on Earth? Whereas the Quran has drawn our attention that the whole universe, including Earth, has been created for a being like us who have a choice and intent, so that through the law of requital and understanding it, they can create a new life within themselves. So this is a very positive aspect put before us. And as a choice, this is an extremely important choice which includes the life of the hereafter. We witness even in today's world that many, even scholarly people who, while impressed by the stellar bodies and their extent in the visible universe, do not direct their rational thought towards the higher purpose of life. This is something which we need to explore in connection with the human psyche. And this is amazing. I've seen numerous YouTube videos, also read through many books, that all these physicists and others, philosophers, they look at the fine-tuning of the universe around us, and they keep praising it, but they never think of it that anything beyond that is for them in this world. We can keep praising the outer world. How is that going to affect our hereafter? Are we going to have that new self which the Quran has asked us by getting it or acquiring it through Iman and Amal Saleh? No Iman, no Amal Saleh. What's the point of keep praising something which Allah knows already and which is pointless? Of course, we give some meaning and explanation, but this is something which they somehow miss it and do not think about it. Why do they make this, which is so obvious to the students of the Quran? Here the Quran has drawn our attention to those who find some kind of business for the trickeries of fortune telling. So as I said, that somehow human beings are very clever, and in some ways they are entrepreneurs as well, that they create a business out of something which I don't think a student of the Quran can even think of it. This is still prevalent in some religious societies. Such thinking also points to the state of an underdeveloped intellect as a consequence of this. People cannot even fully benefit from this life and remain backward. It's unfortunate that they have to resort to this kind of a business to make some money. And these are things which we should think very hard in a profound manner, that the way word is created, we have literally left people at their own. And what else they can do? They have landed up in this world uninvited, and now they have a body which has to be fed, which has certain basic needs. And if there are no jobs, no education, poor start, what should they do? So these are the kind of things we should think hard. And these are the great disadvantages of not having the system of being in the world. Who's going to do something about it, as we have seen that the beneficiaries of the capitalist system promote this backwardness, since they can exploit the natural resources found in the hands in which these people live. Other day I saw a presentation under Alternative View Conference 12. They said that the World Economic Forum is funding some of the aspects of the Quran to misguide people, that is the translations and meanings and other things. And I wonder if all these, this interest in the Quran, not in the pure Quran, but their own versions, has suddenly emerged, and who is funding them? And this is something all of us should think hard and keep an eye on it. Until the system of Deen as a model is established, human beings not comprehending the Quranic line of thought will remain in a condition in which they will exit this worldly life without bringing out those of their potentials which need to be manifested here in this life, so that our self acquires the status of higher eminence. And these lines I put on for reminding our own selves, but at the same time keep this in mind, that by not having a system of Deen anywhere in the world, there is a great disadvantage for those who may be looking for guidance in life and then not finding it. They just can't do much. Now let us look at the next two verses, 19 and 20. The signs in the universe are there to support the Quranic system of Rabubiyat. وَالْأَرْضَ مَدَدْنَهَا وَأَلْقَيْنَا فِيهَا رَوَاسِيَ وَأَنبَتْنَا فِيهَا مِنْ كُلِّ شَيْءٍ مَوْزُونٍ وَجَعَلْنَا لَكُمْ فِيهَا مَعَيْشَةً وَمَنْ لَسْتُمْ لَهُ بِرَازِقِينَ. It's wonderful that in this lecture today, how many points the Quran has covered in these short verses. The fact is that this heaven and the stellar bodies floating in it are all parts of the machinery of our system of Rabubiyat. Because Allah has taken the responsibility of taking His creation from the point of its start to the point of its destination, which is called Rabubiyat. So whole of this system has been created, and primarily it is created for us as human beings, because we have a role in this system of Rabubiyat. Those stellar bodies in the heights and towards the lows, planet Earth, which we have spread out despite being round, and have erected very high mountains in it, from which, besides other benefits, water is used for irrigation of land. From this water, what happens is we have grown in the land all things through optimum balance and proportion. We have pointed to the hydrological cycle throughout the world, which is very effective. If we are having problems, it is because as human beings, we have failed to do our duty. And this produce of the earth was made as a means of sustenance for you, lakum. Over here, the whole of mankind is addressed. There is no exception to it. Both for you and also for that creation for which you are not responsible. I'll read it again. And this produce of the earth was made as a means of sustenance for you, that is lakum, for whole of you. Both for you and also for that creation for which you are not responsible. This last point is very important to keep it in mind. Also for that creation for which you are not responsible. So there is Allah's responsibility directly, and there is His responsibility indirectly. Our planet, now we will reflect on these 19 and 20. Some points will be added. Our planet is not for one man, one tribe, or one nation. It is for whole of mankind as a temporary abode. The Quran's emphasis is on raising the standard of the human intellect to that level where it understands the significance of its own creation. We need to ask this question: is it just in order to live this life at an animalistic level, i.e., eat, drink, bring few children into this world, and then die? For example, without even fully knowing about the functioning of the law of requital. How many people are not aware of the law of requital? During my journey through the Quran, I learned this law of requital at a fairly later stage of my understanding. So we need to pass it on to everyone that there are laws working in our life, and let us not waste our time. While we are pursuing the basic needs of life in whatever state we are in the world, these things at cognitive level do not cost anything. As students of the Quran, Allah has repeatedly asked us to focus on the level of awareness of our thinking so that we understand the problems created by the man-devised systems in the world and to not be deceived by Iblisi ploys. Observe closely the system of the universe and its precise functioning at such a gigantic, infinite scale, and then try to analyze the system of sustenance functioning in that sphere of the world in which human hands have not yet interfered. I put inverted commas on infinite slightly later. The reason is that infinite over here means from our perspective. From Allah's perspective, everything is finite, which He has created. Of course, human beings then become eternal if, because of the nature of the life of the hereafter, and because of possessing divine energy within us, which gives us choice and intent. So these are finer aspects which we need to pay attention to so that the expanse of our awareness keeps increasing. If Allah's Rabubiyat is for the whole of the creation in the universe, including planet Earth, then how come there is so much inequality in the distribution of sustenance in the human world? If some of us, as beneficiaries of the capitalist system, relate these benefits to somehow coming from Allah, then we also intellectually become part of those who do not feel the need to strive to even understand the system of Deen. I put down this comment because I do come across some comments where people who have even come to the Quran, somehow they think that being the beneficiaries, they are having some blessings from Allah. That is very misleading and misguiding. We should never think of that, because we should look at the mankind as a whole and the poverty and exploitation which is going on right in front of our eyes, and not justify our own existence within the capitalist system as some kind of a blessing. If that was the case, then Rasulullah did not have to make any effort in Mecca, because he himself came from the higher strata of the society. He was a beneficiary. Hazrat Ibrahim was a beneficiary of the system as well. Why did he stand up against it? So these are the things which are important to understand, because this becomes a chain on us, and we do not strive hard enough on the path of Deen to develop ourselves to a higher level. Here the Quran has made it clear that sustenance is provided to those for whom you are not responsible. The question arises, for whom are we responsible? And this is a natural next link to this question. For whom are we responsible as human beings? And the Quran answers that. So we come across people who think that if there is God, why there is so much misery and poverty in the world? And they are the ones who are actually contributing to that poverty and misery in the world by not thinking clearly. Because we got so much potential to stand up for those who are underdogs and those who are deprived, and with the help of Allah. And the first stage is to understand it completely, in totality, and not to have a doubt. And this is part of acquiring and strengthening our iman. It becomes glaringly obvious that we as human beings are responsible for fellow human beings in the world. So wherever there are problems in the world, and the man-made system has problems everywhere, in every nook and corner of every city, every society, in fact in families as well. So our mind should always focus on that, and not to be disturbed by the pain of it. Of course, this will cause some kind of uneasiness, but that uneasiness can be removed by understanding the system of Deen, and say that this is how Allah has already explained to us. And we should be assured that whatever we are thinking, Allah is aware of it. So just imagine that so many billions and billions, or other trillions of human beings across the whole universe, all of their pain and injustices are understood by Allah, and He is aware of them. And this is something very important for us to keep it in mind. Now let us look at the last verse for today. Our attention is drawn to a supreme reality next. وَإِن مِّن شَيْءٍ إِلَّا عِندَنَا خَزَائِنُهُ وَمَا نُنَزِّلُهُ إِلَّا بِقَدَرٍ مَعْلُومٍ. We have with us in the highs and lows of the universe unlimited supplies for these things which become as means of sustenance for you. But we bring these forth according to a defined scale. Another name for this defined scale is the law of nature. And let us look at first, I thought we should go through the root of the qadarin. Qadar is the root word under this particular term or word. Estimate, scale, measuring dimensions, comparing one thing with another, proportion, for example, takdir, miqdar, qadar, these are the derivatives. Qadar means estimating something, volume, size, length, breadth, etc. Also means to have control and authority over something. Applying reflection and reasoning to resolve an issue, or to prepare and balance something, i.e. making decisions. There are some applications which are noted here from Lughatul Quran. Qadar and Taqdeer mean estimate, scale or standard, or to make something according to an estimate and standard. Also keeping proportion and balance of something precisely and accurately. In order to keep something within a scale and proportion, it is required to be under full control. Hence, Qadar also means to have authority and control. In order to settle some matter, to reflect and ponder over it, from this is drawn the meaning of decision making. Handing over something by measuring and weighing it. The meaning of respect also falls under it, i.e. the status at which someone is, keeping a correct estimate of it. Making something to reach that pattern which is defined for it, i.e. actualize its potentialities, and hence it reaches its final point. There are a number of other aspects as well, and it will be useful if we can have a look on those aspects. But one thing is clear, that when these words or terms appear in the Quran, we need to look at the context in which these have been used and look at the wider context as well. Not only the narrow context, but also at the wider context in which these terms are used. Because the whole point is to expand the dimensions of our awareness. Our own intellectual horizon should expand. Now let us look at some points here. The Quran draws our attention to far ahead of the era in which we reside. First is, three important points have appeared in this verse which need a profound reflection. Firstly, by stating the Quran says, "In min shay'in illa indana khazainuhu." The Quran has assured us that the universe is created for man so that all his choices bear results. And for this, there is a need to have enough sustenance for all times. Because if we run short of sustenance, then of course our life will end earlier than what is planned. For example, if I have to live for 80 years, 90 years, or whatever the span which my physical makeup will allow me to live, then these means of sustenance should not run out. These should be there for me to carry out my deeds, and whatever efforts I'm making or striving I'm doing, its results should come out. And just imagine that it has to be for all times. There are billions of more people coming to this planet in the future, and there has to be enough sustenance for all of them. وَلَكُمْ فِي الْأَرْضِ مُسْتَقَرًّا وَمَتَاعٌ إِلَىٰ حِينٍ. This is a verse at the beginning of Surah Al-Baqarah, where it says it is made clear that in this first stage of his life, in which he will use his choice and intent freely, there will be enough to sustain him adequately. It will be part of his efforts to ensure that by following the guidance of Wahi, he does not end up creating fear and grief. The Quran said, فَإِمَّا يَأْتِيَنَّكُم مِّنِّي هُدًى فَمَن تَبِعَ هُدَايَ فَلَا خَوْفٌ عَلَيْهِمْ وَلَا هُمْ يَحْزَنُونَ. I think we'll have to check. This is verse 36, so this is a misprint. So over here, Quran has said that earth will be your first stage of life, and you will have enough for this stage. So mustaqarrum, by saying mustaqarrum, is that stage where we rest for the time being, and then we move on to the next one, and that stage which will hand us over to the next stage, which is after our physical death. And here the Quran says, فَإِمَّا يَأْتِيَنَّكُم مِّنِّي هُدًى فَمَن تَبِعَ هُدَايَ فَلَا خَوْفٌ عَلَيْهِمْ وَلَا هُمْ يَحْزَنُونَ. If you remember, Adam was told that now you have brought yourself down. But remember, this is not your permanent state. If you follow that guidance, which will come from the direction of Allah, man tabi'a, if you follow that hudaya, that hadayat, that guidance, then you will not have any fear and you will not have any huzn. And we have gone over this aspect a few times before as well. Then secondly, Quran says, وَمَا نُنَزَّلُهُ, which means that gradually this comes down. It will all be there for Adam to explore and obtain benefits. So all these means of sustenance are not going to be disclosed or are going to be before you, all of them together at one point, because one is, of course, that a lot of these are associated with the way we work in the world. And a lot of these, we have to make them sustainable. But at the same time, that if the wrong system is there, then few people may not get hold of everything which they have. We can see the distribution of fossil fuels from, for example, across the world. These are not just in one land. These are in different parts of the universe, of the earth. And we are discovering them through our own efforts. If he uses the guidance of Wahi sent down by Allah, not a product of the human intellect, then he will be able to use it optimally, i.e. not be wasteful and create chaos as we witness today. So it is not a question of only having all these means of sustenance for our convenience so that we can follow the path of Allah. But the question over here is how to use them optimally. And for that use of optimally, we will have to follow the permanent values. Otherwise, we will exactly see the kind of a chaos which we see in our world today. Thirdly, Quran says, Beqadar in Maloom. And we have seen the meanings of Qadar, and Maloom means, of course, the knowledge. And also it means known. Known means that if you make an effort, you will find out the estimated standards of everything, that how much quantity is there and how much more will come in your direction so that you can plan ahead. All the sustenance cannot be accessed at the same time as it is related to human efforts. For example, land has the capacity to produce crops, but it is up to man how much he can get out of it through the use of his intellect and hard work. These means of sustenance are distributed throughout the planet in such a way that mankind needs to cooperate. If all of these were in one land, then this forced cooperation wouldn't have been there, willingly or unwillingly. Presently, if we look at it, it's an amazing system that these are distributed throughout the land, and some very rational thinking people, some grossly irrational people, and you know to which I am referring to get benefits from these resources. There is another aspect of these resources, that all these were lying there for eons. It is only now in the recent past that man has discovered these and is bringing these under his use. So obviously it means that those who are reading these verses of the Quran were not really acting on them. They were not thinking through them. They were more thinking into rituals rather than understanding that how big treasures of Allah to which Quran is pointing our attention. How much more is there to meet his future needs? How much is there to facilitate the system of Deen? How much resource of his intellect is there? Now, what I did was that I looked at it and I said, wait a minute, intellect is also a resource, and what are we doing with it? Have we developed it to that extent in the light of the Quran, which can meet the needs of mankind, which is going to become explored in the coming years under the non-Quranic systems? So we should be very pleased that on this platform, we are trying our level best to expand the horizon of our thinking. And what is lying ahead for his cognitive potentials to manifest their eminent aspects under the system of Deen. And this is where then Quran says, وَأَشْرَقَتِ الْأَرْضُ بِنُورِ رَبِّهَا. And that will be the state where the earth will be lightened up with the light of Allah. And see, the word Rab has been used, which refers to Rabubiyat. Rabubiyat will lead to the emergence of a new world on this planet created by moment selves. And finally, verse 1521 reassures to Momineen in relation to the system of Deen. I thought that let us put down some points that what is in it for us. Of course, all of it is for us, but over here I've specifically looked at more closely, and I thought I'll share this understanding with everyone. Human beings also make these resources sustainable where possible, and there these appear to be finite. For example, fossil fuels, for which we make efforts to search for other means of energy. This is part of finding out other means of sustenance. For example, nowadays the fracking is going on, and there is an opposition to that as well for certain environmental reasons. The ability for which is within us. We need to keep in mind as students of the Quran that whatever is discovered by man is meant to be brought out. All this becomes a step towards the evidence that the Quran is al-Haq. And Quran has noted this in chapter 41, verse 53. سَنُرِيهِمْ آيَاتِنَا فِي الْآفَاقِ وَفِي أَنفُسِهِمْ حَتَّى يَتَبَيَّنَ لَهُمْ أَنَّهُ الْحَقُّ. The Quran says that soon we will show them the signs in the outer world, fil afaqi, and within their own psyche. And see how much we are discovering about the human psyche. We have learned that what are the default weaknesses of human beings, out of which we have to grow and strengthen ourselves, and what impact Iman has on our psyche. Hatta yatabayyana lahum annahu al-haq, that a stage will come where mankind will find out, will know that what is given in the Quran is haq, and it is for their own benefit. They don't have to live a miserable life under fear and huzn. They can live a happy life here, and then we'll have a lot for them awaiting in the hereafter. So Sanurihim, it was going on through trial and error process, and now we are making an effort to speed up the whole process. Of course, Allama Parvez did it through his books and through the lectures, and now we are sharing these verses among us to project the system of Deen for the good of whole of mankind. It's a slow step, it's a small step, but it will speed up at some point in time in the future. This does not mean that we wait for others to discover these new resources and modes of utilization of these resources for the use of a few privileged groups. Rather, it is our duty to reflect on this aspect and do research and development with a view to meet the needs of every human being in today's world and have enough ready to welcome those who are going to arrive here in the future. There is a madness going on in terms of the way these fossil fuels, for example, are being used in the world. And there is a desperation that people are, so much is being wasted because the aim of their life is not clear. And this is something which we should keep it in mind and keep observing what is going on in the world. Drawing the attention of others is part of this responsibility of ours. Regarding the optimum and appropriate use of the finite resources, for example, fossil fuels and their impact on our world's environment is part of this understanding. If we look at the present world, there is meaningless movement of vehicles and aeroplanes taking place in the aimless pursuit of these desires. Those desires in which the hereafter and the interest of the whole of mankind never form part of it. By adding malum, which is, of course, the root is ilm, at the end, Allah has invited us to gain knowledge from every aspect in the world in which we live, and to then analyze it critically using the Quranic lens and light. With that, we come to the end of this presentation. Thanks for your time and for sharing this presentation.